In the heart of Las Vegas, under the roaring lights of the Grand Garden Arena, a global icon walked into the cage with a grin. John Cena, loud, fearless, untouchable, was about to cross a line no one else dared. What began as playful spectacle turned volatile when he mocked Chuck Norris before 20,000 stunned fans. Chuck Norris wasn't your typical retired fighter. For over 40 years, he was a 6-time world karate champion and the man who once revolutionized American martial arts, remembered for defeating opponents with precision and calm no showman could match. When John Cena called him a joke and dared him into the cage, Cena had no idea he was stepping into the arena of a master whose silence was more lethal than any insult. Norris's silent advance and surgical counters unleashed a lesson that would ripple far beyond the cage. What began as a taunt in an exhibition cage would become a living legend's rebirth. The Grand Garden Arena would never forget the night Chuck Norris proved that mastery outlives memes. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Las Vegas night pulsed with neon energy as limousines and luxury SUVs lined the entrance to the Grand Garden Arena. Digital billboards flashed with larger-than-life images of combat sports icons, past legends, and present-day champions gathered for what promoters had dubbed the collision of eras. Camera flashes erupted like lightning as celebrities walked the red carpet, each arrival amplifying the buzz that had been building for weeks. Inside, the arena hummed with anticipation. 20,000 seats filled rapidly as the main floor transformed into a spectacle of spotlights and sound. The cage at center stage gleamed under precision lighting, surrounded by rows of VIP seating where Hollywood stars mingled with fight royalty. Commentators tested microphones at their booth, voices building with practiced excitement. Ladies and gentlemen, we are just moments away from the most extraordinary exhibition event in combat sports history. The lead announcer's voice boomed across the arena. Tonight, legends meet icons in a celebration of fighting excellence spanning decades. The crowd's attention shifted as music suddenly blasted through the speakers, an unmistakable entrance theme that sent fans leaping to their feet. The opening notes of "The Time Is Now" triggered an eruption of cheers and boos in equal measure. John Cena emerged from the tunnel, arms spread wide, his trademark smile gleaming under the spotlights. He wore designer jeans and a fitted t-shirt that showcased his chiseled physique, moving with the confident swagger of a man who owned every room he entered. He jogged down the aisle, slapping hands with fans who reached out desperately from the barrier. "And there he is, folks," the commentator shouted over the noise. 16-time world champion, Hollywood star, and one of the most charismatic figures in entertainment, John Cena. Cena leapt onto the ring apron in a single bound, climbing through the ropes with athletic grace that belied his size. He circled the cage, playing to the crowd with practiced gestures that triggered waves of response. His energy was infectious, his presence commanding. He grabbed a microphone from a crew member and strode to the center of the cage. "Vegas!" His voice filled the arena. "Are you ready for the greatest night in combat sports history?" The crowd roared. Cena's grin widened. He began working the audience like a conductor with an orchestra, pointing to different sections and drawing out cheers, building energy with each gesture. Tonight is about legends, about icons, about the men who defined what it means to be a fighter. He continued, pacing the cage with boundless energy. "And I gotta say, I'm honored to be standing here among them." He paused for effect, turning slowly to take in the crowd. Well, almost all of them. The energy in the room shifted subtly. Fans exchanged glances. At that moment, the arena lights dimmed unexpectedly, causing a ripple of surprised murmurs. A spotlight tracked slowly across the VIP entrance, where security personnel flanked a side door. The crowd's attention fixed on the entrance as a figure emerged without musical fanfare or theatrical announcement. Chuck Norris walked quietly into the arena, dressed in simple black pants and a fitted dark button-up shirt. His trademark reddish beard, now silver with age, was neatly trimmed. He moved with the measured confidence of a man who had nothing to prove, acknowledging the sudden hush with a single, slight nod. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice had dropped to a tone of reverence. "Martial arts legend, six-time world karate champion, and cultural icon, Chuck Norris." The crowd rose in a wave, respect radiating from every corner of the arena. No music played. None was needed. Chuck's presence commanded attention through sheer gravitational pull, drawing eyes without demanding them. He made his way to his front row seat with quiet dignity, stopping occasionally to shake hands with fellow veterans of the fight world who stood as he passed. In the cage, Cena's expression flickered momentarily as the spotlight shifted away from him. He watched Chuck take his seat, then bounced on his heels, recapturing his showman's energy. "And speaking of legends," Cena continued, voice rising again, "we've got quite the collection tonight, don't we? Some who defined eras, some who transcended the sport." He gestured toward various fighters seated around the arena, each acknowledgement drawing cheers. At ringside, a weathered man with the posture of a lifelong coach leaned toward his companion. "This should be interesting," he muttered. The veteran trainer's eyes moved between Cena and Norris, measuring the distance between showmanship and substance. "The thing about legends, though," Cena continued, his theatrical voice commanding attention again, "is separating the real ones from the myths." A subtle tension threaded through the room. Cena began circling the cage again, microphone gripped tight. Energy building. "You look around tonight. You see fighters who bled for this sport, who evolved it, who lived it." His gaze settled briefly on Chuck Norris, who sat with perfect stillness, hands folded comfortably in his lap. And then, Cena's voice dropped dramatically, "You've got the memes." The word hung in the air like a challenge. Camera operators swiveled to capture Chuck's reaction. But his expression remained impassive, eyes steady beneath the brim of his hat. Cena continued building momentum. "See? Some legends are made in the ring, forged through combat." He thumped his chest. "Some are made on the screen, entertaining millions." He gestured to himself and around the arena. "But some," he pointed directly at Chuck, "some are just made-up facts on the internet." A collective intake of breath swept the arena. The commentators exchanged shocked glances. "Did he just?" the color commentator whispered. "He did," the play-by-play announcer confirmed, voice tense. Chuck Norris didn't move, didn't blink. His hands remained folded in his lap, his breathing steady. The only indication he'd heard Cena at all was a slight, almost imperceptible narrowing of his eyes. The veteran trainer at ringside shook his head slowly. "Kids playing with fire," he murmured. "Just loud enough for those nearby to hear." Cena, feeding on the energy of the moment, continued his theatrical monologue, pacing the cage with growing bravado. Chuck Norris jokes were funny in what? 2005? Now it's just nostalgia for something that was never real in the first place. He gestured expansively. "When's the last time anyone actually saw the man fight? Actually throw a punch that wasn't choreographed?" The crowd's reaction split. Some laughed uncomfortably. Others muttered in disapproval. Phones lifted everywhere, capturing the moment. Social media was about to explode. "I respect everyone here tonight," Cena said, his voice dropping into a mock, serious tone that undercut the sentiment. "The champions, the contenders, the legends who built this sport brick by brick. He paused dramatically. But let's be real. Some legends are just outdated. In the front row, Chuck Norris remained motionless. His legendary composure, the same calm focus that had made him a six-time world champion decades before, remained undisturbed. The only person in the arena not reacting to the escalating tension was the very target of it. Nearby, a young fighter nudged his coach. "Is Norris going to say something?" The veteran trainer shook his head again. "He doesn't need to." Cena, perhaps unsettled by Chuck's lack of response, doubled down. "Hey, Chuck," he called directly. "I know you can hear me over there." The strong, silent routine worked great in the 80 seconds. But this is 2025. We like our legends to actually show up, not just sit there looking, well, old. The commentators winced audibly. "This is unprecedented," one whispered into his microphone. John Cena deliberately provoking Chuck Norris. "I'm not sure he understands what he's doing," his partner replied. The crowd's mood continued to fracture, younger fans laughing at Cena's boldness. Older spectators shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Camera operators scrambled to capture every reaction. Through it all, Chuck Norris sat perfectly still. An island of calm in the storm of growing chaos. His expression remained neutral. Not angry. Not amused, simply present. His hands hadn't moved from their relaxed position in his lap. Cena, committed now to the bit, leaned against the cage closest to Chuck. "What do you say, old-timer? Want to prove me wrong? Show these people you're more than just a punchline?" The crowd began to stir. Uncertain murmurs, growing into distinct chants. From different sections came competing calls. "Cena! Cena!" battled with "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" The veteran trainer sighed deeply. This won't end well for the kid. Cena, grinning widely now, spread his arms in a theatrical gesture of invitation. "One round, Chuck. Just one round to show these people you're still the legend and not just the meme. What do you say?" For the first time since the provocation began, Chuck Norris moved. It was subtle, just a slight shift in his seated position, a minimal adjustment of his posture. But it sent a ripple through those nearest to him, as if they'd felt a tremor before an earthquake. The arena's energy transformed instantly. Phones lifted higher. Breath held collectively. Chuck's eyes, sharp and clear despite his age, locked onto Cena's with laser focus. Still, he didn't speak. Didn't need to. The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees under that steady gaze. Cena's smile flickered, almost imperceptibly. He recovered quickly, bouncing on the balls of his feet. "That's what I thought," he said, voice carrying a forced lightness. "Just like I said, legends that stay legends, by never testing themselves again." As if in slow motion, Chuck Norris stood. The movement was unhurried, deliberate. Controlled the same disciplined economy of motion that had made him a martial arts pioneer. He rose to his full height, shoulders relaxed but perfectly aligned, presence expanding to fill the arena without a single word spoken. The chants died instantly. 20,000 people fell silent. Cena stopped mid-stride, microphone still raised, as the spotlight shifted from him to Chuck. For the briefest moment, uncertainty flashed across his face, before his showman's mask slipped back into place. "Well," he said, voice carrying a hint of surprise, "looks like someone's feeling nostalgic tonight." Chuck Norris took one step toward the cage, then another, each movement precise, each step building a tension that crackled through the arena like electricity. The veteran trainer at ringside stood now too, eyes narrow with anticipation. As Chuck approached the cage, the crowd began to stir again, a new chant building from scattered voices to a unified roar. Chuck! 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 The showman had commanded the stage with noise and bravado. Now, the legend reclaimed it with nothing but silence and presence. And in that moment, as Chuck Norris reached the steps to the cage, even John Cena seemed to realize what he had started might be something he couldn't finish. John Cena maintained his performer's smile, but his eyes tracked Chuck Norris's every movement. The legend ascended the steps to the cage with methodical precision, each foot placed with purpose, hands relaxed at his sides. No wasted energy. No theatrical flourish. Just the measured advance of a man who had been in countless real battles before Hollywood ever called. Ladies and gentlemen, the lead commentator's voice was hushed despite the microphone. I'm not sure what we're witnessing, but Chuck Norris appears to be accepting John Cena's challenge. This wasn't on the program, his partner added, shuffling papers nervously. The crowd's chanting intensified. The rhythm of "Chuck, Chuck, Chuck," creating a percussive backdrop to the unfolding drama. Security personnel exchanged uncertain glances, clearly unprepared for this deviation from the scheduled entertainment. Cena, still center cage, adjusted his posture, subtly straightening to his full impressive height, squaring his shoulders. The showman's grin remained fixed, but something had changed in his eyes. Calculation replaced casual confidence. Well, he spoke into the microphone, voice artificially relaxed. Looks like the internet legend wants to step into reality. He gestured dramatically toward Chuck. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Chuck Norris, who's apparently decided to join us mere mortals in the real world of fighting. The attempt at humor fell flat. The crowd's attention had fully shifted. All eyes locked on Chuck as he reached the cage door. A production assistant rushed to open it, stepping back with visible reverence. Chuck paused at the threshold, still silent, still composed. His eyes hadn't left Cena's since he stood. "Come on in," Cena called, gesturing expansively. "The water's fine. Well, for some of us anyway." He winked at the crowd, trying to recapture the light-hearted atmosphere, but the joke died in the electrified air. As Chuck stepped through the door into the cage, the veteran trainer at ringside leaned toward his companion again. "Kid doesn't realize it yet, but he's already lost." "What do you mean?" the younger fighter asked. "Look at him." The trainer nodded toward Cena. "He's performing. Chuck's preparing. Big difference." Indeed. While Cena continued his theatrical pacing, Chuck simply moved to his corner of the cage. No flourish, no acknowledgement of the thunderous applause that greeted his entrance. He simply stood, centered and still, a statue amid chaos. Cena, perhaps sensing the energy shifting away from him, doubled down on his provocation. "For those just tuning in," he announced, microphone still clutched in his hand, "we've got ourselves an unscheduled exhibition. Chuck Norris action star, internet meme, and, if you believe the stories, undefeated fighter who's never been tested in the modern era has decided to step into the cage." Chuck removed his hat and handed it to someone outside the cage. Still no reaction to Cena's words. "I've got to say," Cena continued, bouncing lightly on his feet, "I'm surprised. I figured you'd stay safely behind those Walker Texas Ranger reruns and internet jokes." He turned to the crowd with exaggerated surprise. "But credit where it's due. The man showed up." A few scattered laughs echoed through the arena, but they quickly faded. The mood had transformed into something deeper than entertainment. The spectators sensed they were witnessing something raw and genuine. A true collision of eras that transcended the scheduled programming. "Should someone stop this?" the color commentator whispered, his microphone accidentally live. "I'm not getting in the middle of it," his partner replied. Chuck began a series of simple stretches, rolling his shoulders, flexing his hands. Each movement displayed the fluid mobility that belied his age, muscles moving with the memory of thousands of hours of training. "Oh, we're stretching now," Cena narrated, watching Chuck's preparation. "Very professional, very old school." He turned to the crowd with a theatrical whisper. "Should someone tell him this isn't 1,985? The short shorts and high kicks went out with VHS tapes. More phones lifted to record, but the laughter that had greeted Cena's earlier jokes had largely disappeared. Something in Chuck's focused preparation silenced even the most boisterous fans. "All right," Cena said, finally setting aside the microphone and rolling his massive shoulders. "Let's give the people what they want. A quick exhibition to show them the difference between legends and memes." He approached the center of the cage, extending his hand for the customary touch of gloves. Chuck stepped forward, eyes locked on Cena's, but didn't raise his hand. "No touch? Old school? I respect it," Cena said, voice still carrying to the front rows without the microphone. "Let's keep it light, just a friendly exhibition. No need to strain anything at your age." Chuck remained silent, his expression unchanged, but something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, not even determination. Something deeper. Recognition, perhaps. The quiet acknowledgement of a challenge that needed no words. From ringside, an official hastily climbed into the cage. "Gentlemen, this isn't scheduled. We can't officially—" "It's an exhibition," Cena interrupted, not taking his eyes off Chuck. "Strictly for the fans. No rules, no winner, no loser. Just a little demonstration." He flashed his trademark smile at the official. "Right, Chuck?" Chuck gave a single, slight nod. His first response to anything since entering the arena. The official looked uncertain, glancing between the two men and then toward the promoter at ringside, who offered a reluctant shrug of acquiescence. This unplanned confrontation had captured the crowd's attention more effectively than any scheduled bout. "All right," the official said reluctantly. "Exhibition only. I'll stop it at the first sign of—" "You won't need to," Cena assured him with a wink. "This'll be quick and friendly. Just giving the fans something to remember. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story." As the official retreated, Cena turned back to Chuck with renewed bravado. "Last chance to back out, old-timer. No shame in preserving the legend." Chuck's expression didn't change. He simply raised his hands into a classic fighting stance, relaxed, balanced, nothing flashy. The stance of a man who had been in real combat, not choreographed matches. "All right then," Cena said, bouncing lightly on his toes and raising his own hands in a more contemporary guard. "Let's see what you've got left in the tank." The crowd fell into a hushed anticipation. No bell rang. This wasn't an official bout, but the moment stretched with unbearable tension. Then Cena moved, launching forward with explosive power, throwing a quick jab that sliced through the air where Chuck's head had been a split second earlier. The older fighter had shifted just enough for the punch to miss, his own position barely changed. Cena blinked in surprise, then recovered quickly, offering a showman's laugh. "Good reflexes for your age. Let's try again." He threw a three-punch combination, fast, powerful strikes that would have impressed in any professional match. Chuck slipped each one with minimal movement, his economy of motion making Cena's attacks look exaggerated and wasteful. A murmur swept through the crowd. "Did you see that?" the commentator whispered. "I'm not sure what I just saw," his partner replied honestly. Cena's performer's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. He reset, circling Chuck with more deliberate attention now. All right. I see you've still got some moves. Let's pick up the pace a little. He launched a more complex attack, mixing punches with a sudden attempt at a takedown. Chuck's response was fluid, a subtle shift of weight, a redirection of force rather than resistance to it. Cena found himself off balance, stumbling slightly before recovering his footing. For the first time, Chuck moved offensively, a lightning-quick strike that stopped just short of Cena's chest, demonstrating range and control rather than attempting to land with force. Cena's eyes widened slightly, professional mask slipping for just an instant. From ringside, the veteran trainer nodded slowly. There it is. Just a taste. A taste of what? His companion asked. The real thing. The trainer replied simply. Cena reset again. His theatrical approach now replaced by genuine fighter's focus. The exhibition had transformed into something else, a test he hadn't expected to be challenging. Not bad for a guy your age, he said, voice lowered now. Intended only for Chuck's ears. But this is still my world, not yours. He unleashed his most impressive combination, yet the full athleticism of a man in his prime, moves honed through decades in the wrestling ring and countless hours of training. Any normal opponent would have been overwhelmed by the sheer physical presence and speed. Chuck Norris was not normal. He moved like water around stone, deflecting rather than blocking, conserving energy while Cena expended it. When he countered, his strikes were precise and controlled, pulling short each time, demonstrating what could have happened without forcing it. The crowd began to understand what they were witnessing. The chants for Chuck grew louder, drowning out the scattered calls for Cena. Cena, breathing slightly harder now, reset once more. The showman's smile had disappeared entirely, replaced by the focused expression of an athlete facing unexpected challenge. All right, he said quietly. You've made your point. You've still got some moves. Let's wrap this up before someone gets hurt. It was an exit strategy, an attempt to end the exhibition with dignity intact, but Chuck's steady gaze offered no easy escape. He simply remained in his fighting stance, patient and prepared. Cena nodded once, accepting the unspoken response. He moved in again, this time with a wrestler's approach, attempting to use his superior size and strength to clinch and control. Chuck's response was decades of martial arts mastery distilled into a single moment. He sidestepped, redirected, and with a movement almost too fast to follow, executed a perfect sweep that sent Cena tumbling to the mat. The arena erupted. 20,000 people leapt to their feet as one. The commentators shouted over each other, trying to describe what they'd just witnessed. Camera flashes exploded like a lightning storm. Cena rolled immediately back to his feet, athlete's instincts taking over. His expression had transformed completely now, the showman gone, replaced by a competitor whose pride had been genuinely touched. Lucky move, he muttered, resetting his stance. Chuck simply waited, hands raised, balance perfect. His breathing remained steady, his focus unwavering. He hadn't spoken a single word since entering the arena, but his actions were now shouting. Cena attacked again, all pretense abandoned. This was no longer an exhibition, but a genuine test of skills. His movements were powerful, technical, impressive, the full arsenal of a gifted athlete at the peak of his physical abilities. Chuck's response remained measured, efficient, precise, the distilled wisdom of a true martial artist who had transcended the need for flash and spectacle. He defended, countered, controlled the space between them with mastery born of tens of thousands of hours of real practice. The contrast could not have been more stark. Cena fought with everything he had, expending enormous energy with each explosive movement. Chuck fought with only what he needed, each motion calibrated to maximum efficiency. My God, the veteran trainer whispered at ringside. He's the same as he was 30 years ago. In the cage, the dynamic had shifted completely. Cena was no longer the confident provocateur, but the frustrated challenger, unable to impose his will on an opponent who seemed to anticipate his every move. "Come on," he growled, launching another attack. "Fight back for real." Chuck finally obliged. With timing honed through decades of real combat, he countered Cena's next rush with a perfectly placed strike, not pulled this time, but delivered with precisely controlled force. The blow caught Cena clean, stopping him mid-charge. The arena fell silent for a heartbeat, then erupted again as Cena staggered back, genuinely rocked for the first time. Cena shook his head, eyes wide with disbelief. The narrative he had constructed, the young star exposing the outdated legend, had collapsed entirely. In its place stood a new reality. The legend was proving exactly why he had become one in the first place. "All right," Cena said, voice tight with newfound respect. "I see it now." Chuck simply nodded once. The acknowledgement needed no elaboration. From the commentator's booth came the stunned voice of the play-by-play announcer. "Ladies and gentlemen, what we're witnessing right now defies description. Chuck Norris, at his age, is not just hanging with John Cena. He appears to be controlling this exhibition entirely." "This isn't about age or strength," his partner replied with rare insight. "This is about mastery. We're watching decades of real martial arts experience against modern athletic showmanship, and mastery is winning." In the cage, Cena had finally recognized the full extent of the situation. His provocations had led him into waters far deeper than he had anticipated. The meme, as he had dismissively called Chuck, was proving to be more substantial than the flashy persona Cena himself had cultivated. "I think that's enough for an exhibition," Cena said, lowering his hands slightly. The fans got what they came for. But the crowd disagreed. The chants grew louder, more insistent. "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" They wanted a definitive moment. A clear demonstration of what had become obvious to everyone watching closely. They wanted the legend to reclaim his status not through internet jokes but through the skill that had made him famous in the first place. Chuck Norris, still silent, still composed, remained in his fighting stance. His eyes conveyed what words didn't need to. The choice to continue or stop belonged to Cena. But if they continued, the outcome was no longer in doubt. Cena understood the message. His options had narrowed to two: continue and face a decisive defeat, or withdraw and acknowledge he had misjudged entirely. Neither preserved the narrative he had created when he first grabbed the microphone. The veteran trainer at ringside nodded with satisfaction. Now he gets it. Took long enough. John Cena, to his credit, chose the path of a true professional. He straightened up, fully dropping his guard, and extended his hand not in the pre-fight ritual he had offered earlier, but in genuine acknowledgement. "Looks like the internet undersold you," he said, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "I stand corrected." Chuck Norris looked at the extended hand for a moment, his expression unchanged. 20,000 people held their breath. Then, with the same controlled precision that had characterized his every movement, Chuck reached out and shook Cena's hand. The crowd roared its approval, but the sound seemed distant compared to the intensity of the moment between the two men. Something had been communicated that transcended the spectacle around them, a truth about skill, about discipline, about respect, earned rather than demanded. As their hands separated, Chuck finally spoke, his voice low enough that only Cena could hear the words. Whatever he said caused Cena's eyes to widen slightly, then narrow in thought. The legend had delivered his message not just to Cena, but to everyone watching. Without grandstanding, without boasting, without needing to prove anything to anyone but himself. And as Chuck Norris turned to exit the cage, the arena rose as one in standing ovation. Not for an internet meme or an action star, but for a true master who had just shown that real strength needs no advertisement. It simply is. The arena's atmosphere had transformed from entertainment to reverence as Chuck Norris moved toward the cage door. His point made without fanfare or showboating, he seemed ready to return to his seat, the brief exhibition having served its purpose. Cena remained center cage, watching Chuck's departure with newfound respect etched across his features. But the crowd wasn't ready for closure. Fight! 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 The chant started somewhere in the upper deck, spreading rapidly through the stands like wildfire. The rhythmic demand echoed off the arena walls, gaining momentum with each repetition. Chuck paused at the cage door, his back to Cena. Shoulders still relaxed but posture attentive. He turned slightly, not fully facing Cena but acknowledging the crowd's call. Cena, ever the showman despite his recent humbling, recognized the moment's potential. He moved forward, still maintaining respectful distance. "They want more," he called to Chuck, voice carrying just enough for those in the front rows to hear. "What do you say? A real round, not just an exhibition? Show these people what happens when legends collide?" Chuck turned fully now, his expression measured, eyes evaluating not just Cena but the entire situation. The crowd's chanting intensified, sensing the possibility of witnessing something truly historic, not just a promotional appearance but an authentic clash of icons. The commentators leaned forward in their booth. "Is this actually happening?" The play-by-play announcer whispered to his partner. "Are we about to witness a legitimate contest between Chuck Norris and John Cena?" "If we are," his partner replied, "we're watching history in the making." In the front row, the veteran trainer leaned back, arms folded across his chest, a knowing expression settling on his weathered face. "Now comes the real test," he said to no one in particular. Chuck Norris surveyed the arena slowly, taking in the electrified atmosphere. For decades, he had let his actions speak louder than words. Tonight had proven nothing had changed. But the challenge before him now was different, not just to demonstrate his skill, but to decide whether this moment called for more than he had already shown. After what seemed an eternity compressed into seconds, Chuck gave a single, deliberate nod. The arena exploded. 20,000 voices united in a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. Phones lifted higher, social media mentions multiplying exponentially, as the unscheduled exhibition evolved into something unprecedented. Cena's expression shifted through a complex series of emotions: surprise, concern, determination, and finally, resolute acceptance. He had started this encounter with cocky dismissal of a legend. Now he found himself facing the reality of what that legend embodied. "Ladies and gentlemen," the lead commentator's voice struggled to rise above the crowd's sustained reaction. "It appears we're about to witness an actual contest between Chuck Norris and John Cena. This is completely unplanned, completely unexpected, and completely extraordinary." Officials scrambled at ringside, conferring urgently with the promoter and security personnel. This deviation from the program created both risk and opportunity. Potential liability balanced against the viral moment already unfolding across every platform. "We need rules. Parameters," one official insisted. "We need to get out of their way," the promoter countered, gesturing toward the cage where history was unfolding without their input. Inside the cage, Cena and Chuck had reached the center, standing face to face with the controlled tension of two predators assessing each other. Cena's earlier theatrical bravado had vanished completely, replaced by the focused intensity of an athlete preparing for genuine challenge. "One round," Cena said, voice low and serious. Real but controlled. No judges, no official winner. Just two fighters showing respect for the craft. Agreed? Chuck nodded once, eyes never leaving Cena's. He spoke for the first time since entering the cage, his voice quiet but clear. Respect is earned, not claimed. The simple statement carried weight far beyond its words, a distillation of philosophy earned through decades of discipline. Cena absorbed it with a slight intake of breath, recognition dawning that this encounter had transcended entertainment entirely. A referee hastily entered the cage, approaching the two men with visible uncertainty. Gentlemen, if you're determined to do this, we need to establish some basic... 1 round. Cena interrupted, still focused entirely on Chuck. Light to medium contact. Exhibition rules. We both know where the line is. The referee looked to Chuck, who again nodded once in confirmation. All right, the referee said, clearly relieved to have parameters established. Clean fight. I'll step in if necessary. Touch gloves and move to your corners. This time, when Cena extended his hand, there was no showmanship in the gesture. Chuck met it with his own, the brief contact carrying genuine acknowledgement between fighters. As they separated to opposite sides of the cage, the veteran trainer at ringside caught Chuck's eye. The older man offered a subtle nod that carried decades of shared understanding. Chuck returned it with the barest tilt of his head, communication that required no words between men who spoke the same language of discipline and respect. The referee moved to the center of the cage, gesturing both men forward. The crowd's noise built to a crescendo, then fell into tense anticipation as the official raised his hand. Ready? He asked, looking between them. Chuck settled into his stance, the same balanced, efficient posture that had made him a world champion long before most of the audience was born. Nothing flashy, nothing wasted. Cena adopted a more contemporary fighting posture, blending elements of wrestling and MMA. His physical advantages were obvious: younger, heavier, at the peak of his impressive athletic powers. But the brief exhibition had already demonstrated how little those advantages meant against Chuck's lifetime of mastery. The referee stepped back, hand still raised. The arena held its collective breath. The hand dropped. Begin! For a moment, neither man moved. They circled slowly, measuring distance, assessing options. The theatrical rush of the earlier exhibition had been replaced by the calculated patience of true fighters. Cena moved first, testing Chuck's defenses with a measured jab that fell deliberately short. Chuck responded with subtle head movement, neither retreating nor advancing, simply existing in the space with complete awareness. They're feeling each other out, the commentator observed, voice hushed as if afraid to break the spell settling over the arena. No, his partner corrected with rare insight. Cena's feeling him out. Chuck already knows exactly what's in front of him. The assessment proved accurate as the engagement intensified. Cena advanced with a well-constructed combination: jab, cross, level change suggesting takedown before resetting. Each movement displayed his genuine athletic ability, no longer hampered by showmanship. Chuck responded with the economy of motion that defined his fighting philosophy. Minimal movement, maximal effect. He slipped the jab, deflected the cross, and adjusted his base just enough to discourage the takedown without expending unnecessary energy. My God, the color commentator whispered. It's like watching someone play chess while everyone else is playing checkers. The veteran trainer nodded in silent agreement. Each exchange revealed more of the stark contrast between the fighters, Cena's impressive but conventional athleticism against Chuck's transcendent mastery of fundamentals. Norris isn't just countering, the trainer explained to those nearby. He's controlling the space between them. Every movement has purpose. nothing wasted. Inside the cage, Cena began to understand the depth of the challenge before him. His initial confidence, built on youth and physical advantages, eroded with each exchange. Chuck wasn't just defending, he was dictating the entire flow of the fight through subtle positioning and timing that bordered on prescient. "He knows what I'm going to do before I do it," Cena thought. Frustration bleeding into his expression. Chuck maintained the same composed focus that had characterized his entire career. His breathing remained steady, his movements fluid and precise. Age seemed irrelevant in the face of such complete technical mastery. The crowd had fallen into a reverent hush, punctuated only by gasps, when Chuck would slip a punch by mere millimeters or counter with surgical precision. They were witnessing something rare, the physical manifestation of a lifetime dedicated to perfecting a craft. Cena, to his credit, adjusted his approach. Abandoning his more theatrical techniques, he focused on fundamentals, the same solid foundation that had made him successful in wrestling. His movements became more measured, his attacks more thoughtfully constructed. Chuck acknowledged the adaptation with the slightest nod, a gesture not lost on Cena or the more perceptive observers. The competition had evolved into something unexpected, not just a physical contest but a dialogue between fighters from different eras, speaking through technique rather than words. "He's forcing Cena to fight at his pace, his distance," the commentator observed. "Everything happening in that cage is happening because Chuck Norris allows it to happen." His partner nodded. "This isn't just experience versus youth. This is mastery versus talent. And mastery is winning." Cena launched a particularly well-executed combination, putting together a sequence that would have overwhelmed most opponents. Chuck's response was nothing short of artful, a demonstration of defensive perfection that made the impressive attack seem almost futile. Something shifted in Cena's eyes, frustration giving way to a deeper understanding. He was experiencing firsthand why Chuck Norris had become a legend in the first place. Why his name had transcended his competitive record to become synonymous with martial arts excellence. The round continued, each exchange adding layers to the narrative, unfolding before 20,000 spectators. Cena fought with everything he had: power, speed, creativity, yet constantly found himself guided into Chuck's preferred patterns, countered with techniques that seemed to materialize from nowhere. "It's like fighting a ghost," Cena muttered during a brief clinch, not expecting a response. "No," Chuck replied quietly, his voice carrying no strain despite the physical engagement. "Just someone who's been doing this since before you were born." They separated, resetting once more. The crowd sensed the momentum building toward some inevitable conclusion. Camera flashes intensified, social media feeds flooded with real-time reactions as the unprecedented match approached its climax. Cena, perhaps recognizing that conventional approaches were ineffective, decided on a final, all-in strategy. He launched forward with explosive power, committing fully to a sequence that combined wrestling prowess with striking technique, a showcase of the athleticism that had made him famous. For a breathless moment, it seemed he might break through Chuck's impeccable defense. His speed and power created genuine pressure, forcing Chuck to give ground for the first time in the encounter. The crowd surged to its feet, sensing a turning point. Cena pressed his advantage, confidence building as he finally seemed to find Chuck's rhythm. "He's got him now," someone shouted from ringside. "Chuck's backing up!" The veteran trainer shook his head slowly. "That's not retreating," he said quietly. "That's repositioning." The distinction became clear in the next heartbeat. Chuck's measured steps backward weren't panic or defensive reaction, they were calculated movements to create the perfect distance for what came next. As Cena committed to a powerful right hand, Chuck executed the movement that had defined his career, a perfectly timed roundhouse kick that seemed to materialize from nowhere. The technique was so clean, so technically perfect, that it appeared almost effortless despite the explosive power behind it. The kick didn't make full contact. Chuck maintained the exhibition parameters they had agreed upon, but it passed close enough to Cena's head that the message was unmistakable. In a real fight, the outcome would have been decisive. The arena fell silent, then erupted in thunderous appreciation. Cena froze mid-motion, eyes wide with genuine shock. He had never seen the technique coming, not just because of Chuck's speed, but because the setup had been disguised behind layers of tactical movement that only became clear after the fact. That, the veteran trainer said with quiet satisfaction, is why he's Chuck Norris. The referee stepped between them, signaling the end of the round. 1 minute had stretched into an eternity of lessons, both for Cena and for everyone watching. The two fighters stood facing each other, both breathing steadily, despite the exertion. Cena's expression had transformed completely, the cocky dismissal that had started the encounter replaced by profound respect. "I understand now," he said simply. Chuck nodded once, the barest hint of approval showing in his eyes. No gloating, no celebration, just the quiet acknowledgement between fighters that something authentic had been communicated. As they turned toward their respective corners, the arena's energy shifted into something rarely experienced in combat sports. Not just excitement or appreciation, but genuine reverence. They had witnessed not just a physical contest but a philosophical demonstration. A lesson about the nature of true mastery that transcended the spectacle around it. The veteran trainer stood as Chuck approached the cage door. "Still got it," he said quietly, extending his hand to his contemporary. Chuck clasped it briefly, the exchange between them carrying decades of shared understanding about what it meant to dedicate one's life to the pursuit of excellence. "Never lost it," Chuck replied, his first full sentence of the night carrying the weight of simple truth. Behind them, John Cena remained in the center of the cage, watching Chuck's departure with newfound clarity. The crowd continued its thunderous approval, but Cena seemed deaf to it, absorbed instead in processing what he had just experienced. In less than 5 minutes, his entire perspective had been transformed. He had entered the cage, believing himself the superior fighter, the modern evolution of combat sports, facing an outdated legend. He left it understanding that some principles transcend eras, that true mastery doesn't age or become irrelevant. As Chuck Norris stepped through the cage door, disappearing into the tunnel that led backstage, the message he had delivered without words echoed louder than any speech could have. Respect isn't claimed, it's earned. And legends aren't made by talk. They're forged through lifetimes of silent discipline. The arena buzzed with electric energy as production assistants scrambled to adjust the evening's program. What had been scheduled as a ceremonial exhibition featuring various combat sports legends had transformed into something unprecedented. An actual physical confrontation between Chuck Norris and John Cena that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. "Ladies and gentlemen," the lead announcer's voice carried an undisguised tremor of excitement. "We're going to take a brief intermission to reset for the next segment. Please stay tuned for what promises to be an incredible continuation of tonight's event." Behind the curtain, in the labyrinthine backstage area, Chuck Norris moved with the same measured calm that had characterized his presence in the cage. He acknowledged staff members with polite nods, but maintained his focus, heading toward his private dressing room. The veteran trainer fell into step beside him, waiting until they were away from the immediate crush of personnel before speaking. "You didn't have to hold back that much," he said quietly. Chuck's expression remained neutral, but a hint of amusement flickered in his eyes. "Wasn't about hurting him. Was about teaching him. Think he learned?" "He started to," Chuck replied simply. Inside the arena, The crowd remained at a fever pitch, replaying what they had witnessed through excited conversations and social media posts. The brief encounter between Cena and Norris had transcended entertainment to become a genuine cultural moment. The clash between eras, between approaches to the fighting arts, between noise and substance. In his own dressing room, John Cena sat alone, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor in contemplative silence. The encounter had shaken something fundamental in his worldview, not just about fighting, but about the nature of reputation and legacy. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. 5 minutes, Mr. Cena. A production assistant called. Cena looked up, momentarily confused. 5 minutes until what? Your segment, sir. The producers want you back out there to address the crowd. They think it would create closure for what just happened. Cena nodded slowly, the performer's instincts reasserting themselves. Of course, the show must go on. The unexpected confrontation with Chuck would be incorporated into the program, framed as planned entertainment rather than the spontaneous reality check it had actually been. As he stood, catching his reflection in the mirror, Cena paused. The man looking back at him seemed somehow different than the one who had strutted into the arena an hour earlier. Less certain, perhaps, but more substantive. Tell them I'll be right there, he said finally. Back in the arena, the crowd roared as the lights dimmed and music swelled. The announcer's voice boomed through the speaker system. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the cage, John Cena. His entrance music hit, triggering another wave of response, though more mixed than his initial reception. Cena emerged from the tunnel with his trademark energy, high-fiving fans at the barrier. But observers noted something different in his demeanor. The theatrical swagger had been tempered by a new thoughtfulness. He climbed into the cage, accepting a microphone from a crew member, then paced slowly to the center. The audience quieted, eager to hear his response to what had transpired. So, Cena began, his voice carrying both humor and humility. That didn't exactly go how I expected. Laughter rippled through the crowd, appreciation for his willingness to acknowledge what everyone had witnessed. I came out here earlier talking about legends versus reality, he continued, measuring his words carefully. I thought I was the reality check. Turns out, I was the one who needed checking. The admission drew approving applause from sections of the audience who had been skeptical of his earlier bravado. I've been fortunate in my career to face some of the greatest performers and athletes in the world, Cena said, circling the cage as he spoke. But what I just experienced with Chuck Norris was something different. That wasn't about showmanship or entertainment. That was about mastery, about the real thing. From their commentary position, the announcers exchanged impressed glances. He's actually acknowledging it, the color commentator whispered off mic. That's the thing about real legends, Cena continued, voice carrying genuine reflection. They don't need to tell you they're legendary. They show you. And tonight, I got shown. The crowd erupted in appreciative applause. Cena's willingness to publicly acknowledge his humbling resonated with their own experience of witnessing it. So, I want to take this moment to apologize, he said, voice dropping to a more serious register. Not just to Chuck Norris, though certainly to him, but to everyone who believes in the real foundations of martial arts, discipline, respect, humility. Tonight was a reminder that those values matter more than hype. At the tunnel entrance, unseen by the crowd but visible to Cena, a figure appeared. Chuck Norris stood quietly in the shadows, listening to Cena's address with the same impassive focus he brought to everything. Cena caught sight of him and paused mid-stride. Their eyes met across the distance, an unspoken communication passing between them. Ladies and gentlemen, Cena said, his focus returning to the crowd. I think we all witnessed something special tonight. Not just a physical demonstration, but a reminder about what really matters in any discipline: the substance beneath the surface. He gestured toward the tunnel, where Chuck stood partially concealed. "I'd like to invite the man himself back out here, if he's willing. To give him the proper respect I should have shown from the beginning." The crowd's reaction was immediate, and overwhelming, a roar of approval that sent many to their feet. All eyes turned toward the tunnel entrance, anticipation building. For several long moments, Chuck remained motionless in the shadows. Then, with the same deliberate calm that defined his every movement, he stepped forward into the light. The arena erupted again, a standing ovation washing through the stands like a wave. No entrance music accompanied him. No theatrical lighting. Just the genuine appreciation of 20,000 people witnessing something authentic in an industry built on spectacle. Chuck walked to the cage with measured steps, acknowledging the crowd's response with slight nods but maintaining his characteristic reserve. As he climbed the steps and entered through the door, the cheers intensified, punctuated by chants of "Chuck! Chuck! Chuck!" Cena met him at center cage, extending his hand with genuine respect. Chuck clasped it firmly, the simple gesture carrying more weight than any choreographed segment could have achieved. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cena said into the microphone, "Chuck Norris." He offered the mic to Chuck, who hesitated momentarily before accepting it. The crowd fell silent, hungry for words from the man who had let his actions speak for him. Chuck regarded the microphone thoughtfully, then looked out over the sea of expectant faces. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but clear, carrying the weight of decades of experience. "I didn't come here tonight to prove anything," he said simply. "I've never had to." The statement, delivered without bravado, resonated through the arena. Its truth was self-evident to everyone who had witnessed the earlier encounter. "Real martial arts isn't about talking or showing off," Chuck continued. "It's about discipline. About putting in the work when nobody's watching. About respecting the craft enough to dedicate your life to mastering it." He glanced at Cena, then back to the crowd. "Entertainment has its place, but beneath the entertainment should be something real." Cena nodded, visible humility in his expression. "I appreciate the invitation back out here," Chuck said, beginning to hand the microphone back to Cena. Then he paused, adding one final thought. "Remember, it's not about who makes the most noise. It's about who has something worth saying." With that, he returned the microphone and turned to exit the cage, his point made with characteristic economy. "Ladies and gentlemen," Cena said as Chuck departed, "that's what a real legend looks like." The crowd's response followed Chuck as he made his way back toward the tunnel, appreciation evolving into reverence. They had witnessed something increasingly rare in the age of social media and manufactured celebrity: genuine mastery, earned through decades of disciplined practice rather than clever marketing. As Chuck disappeared once more into the backstage area, the veteran trainer met him at the tunnel entrance. "You didn't have to come back out," he said. Chuck shrugged slightly. "Some lessons need reinforcing." "Which lesson was that?" Chuck's expression remained impassive, but the barest hint of satisfaction showed in his eyes. "That legends aren't made by talk." The trainer nodded, falling into step beside his contemporary as they navigated the corridor. "Think Cena finally understands that?" "He's starting to," Chuck replied. "But understanding isn't the same as embodying." Inside the arena, the scheduled program resumed, but something had fundamentally shifted in the atmosphere. The unexpected confrontation between Chuck and Cena had transcended entertainment to become a genuine moment of truth, a reminder that beneath the spectacle of combat, sports lay principles that remained constant across generations. Watching from the shadows, the promoter checked his phone, eyes widening at the explosion of social media activity. "This is going viral," he muttered to his assistant. "Biggest thing we've ever had." Should we try to get them both back out there again? Maybe set up something more formal? The promoter shook his head slowly. No. Some things you don't mess with. What happened tonight was real. Trying to recapture it would just cheapen it. Back in the cage, John Cena continued his address to the crowd, but his words seemed to carry new weight, informed by the humbling experience he had just endured. The cocky showman had encountered something his theatrics couldn't overcome: the quiet authority of genuine mastery. And as the evening proceeded, that encounter spread across platforms and screens worldwide, not just as entertainment, but as a rare moment of substance breaking through the constant noise of modern media. Chuck Norris hadn't needed to prove he was a legend. He simply was one. And that truth had spoken louder than any promotion ever could. In a world increasingly dominated by those who shouted loudest, he had demonstrated that true power often speaks most clearly through silence and action. And 20,000 witnesses had received a lesson they wouldn't soon forget. Respect isn't claimed through words. It's earned through a lifetime of dedication. The ripples from Chuck Norris and John Cena's confrontation spread through the combat sports world like wildfire. Video clips accumulated millions of views, each replay highlighting the contrast between Cena's theatrics and Chuck's quiet mastery. In his hotel suite overlooking the Las Vegas Strip, Chuck sat in meditation, his phone deliberately turned off and placed in a drawer. His veteran trainer friend arrived with news. "You've broken the internet," the trainer said, settling into an armchair. "The promoters called an emergency meeting. They want to schedule a proper match, make it the main event of their next pay-per-view." Chuck's silence spoke volumes. "That's what I figured," the trainer continued. "They're offering 7 figures. More money for one night than most fighters see in their careers." Chuck gazed at the Las Vegas skyline. "It was never about money. I know that. But they don't understand men like us anymore. Everything's a transaction now. Everything's content." A thoughtful silence settled between them. Two men from an era when martial arts had been as much philosophy as physical practice. "Cena wants to talk to you," the trainer added. "Said he'll be at the private gym tomorrow morning. Said he'd wait, however long it takes." "Interesting," Chuck replied simply. Meanwhile, several floors below, John Cena paced his suite, scrolling through an avalanche of notifications. Unlike Chuck, he had built his career in the social media age, where public perception was currency and online presence required constant maintenance. The responses ranged from supportive to merciless. Many praised his humility in acknowledging his humbling. Others mocked his initial arrogance with predictable internet cruelty. Cena set his phone down, forcing himself away from the digital noise. The experience with Chuck had triggered something deeper than professional embarrassment. It had challenged his fundamental understanding of what constituted strength and respect in his chosen field. His manager's call interrupted these uncomfortable reflections. "John, this is incredible." The voice bubbled through the speaker. "We've got offers from 3 different promotions wanting to build an actual match. The numbers they're throwing around are insane." Cena listened silently, a new perspective filtering this information. "Are you there? The promoter wants a meeting tomorrow to discuss terms for a rematch, proper rules, proper build-up, proper payday." "I don't think Chuck will go for that," Cena said finally. "Everyone has a price," his manager dismissed. "Just focus on your angle, how you're going to build this, what your approach will be." Cena stared at his reflection. "I'll think about it. But first, I need to talk to Chuck directly. No cameras, no promotion. Just fighter to fighter. Perfect angle. We could film the meeting, use it for the promo package." "No," Cena interrupted firmly. "This isn't about promotion. I need to understand something for myself, not for an audience." The confusion in his manager's silence was palpable. In their world, every interaction was potential content. Every moment, a marketable asset. The following morning, in the hotel's private gym, John Cena completed his third hour of training. Alone with his thoughts, he moved through a disciplined routine, stripped of showmanship. No cameras, no audience, just the fundamentals. The door opened quietly. Chuck Norris entered without fanfare, dressed in simple training clothes. His expression registered no surprise at finding Cena already there. "You came," Cena said simply. Chuck began his warm-up with methodical precision. "Your trainer friend said you wanted to talk." "I do. But I was hoping we might train together first. If you're willing." Chuck offered a minimal nod. Training first, talking after. Good priorities. For the next hour, they moved through exercises side by side. Minimal words exchanged. Cena observed Chuck's approach with newfound appreciation, the economy of movement, the perfect form, the complete absence of wasted energy. When they transitioned to technical work, Cena found himself in the unfamiliar role of student. Chuck demonstrated techniques with quiet efficiency, no unnecessary explanation, no ego, just distilled wisdom. "Balance begins here," Chuck said, tapping his midsection. "Not in the feet, not in the mind. Here." Cena absorbed each instruction with genuine attention. There was no audience to impress, just the pure communication between practitioners. "You're fighting your own strength," Chuck observed. "Power is good. Control is better. Find the middle path." The guidance continued. Specific, yet philosophical. Chuck taught not just techniques but principles, foundations that remained constant across styles and eras. "Most fighters think about winning," he said during a brief water break. "Masters think about perfection. Winning follows naturally from the pursuit of perfection, but perfection is never achieved by focusing on winning." Cena nodded, understanding blooming physically as his body absorbed the lessons. "I've been approaching it backward my whole career." "Not backward," Chuck corrected mildly. "Just differently. Entertainment has value, but substance must come first, entertainment second. Reverse that order, and both are diminished." Finally, sweating and physically spent, they settled at a small table with breakfast. "You wanted to talk," Chuck said, setting down his fork. Cena gathered his thoughts. "Last night changed something for me. I've built my career on being loud, on commanding attention, but what you showed me in that cage." He paused. "It was something different, something I've been missing." Chuck listened without interruption, his steady gaze encouraging honesty rather than performance. "The promoters want us to do a rematch," Cena continued. "A proper match, built up with all the usual hype. Big payday for both of us." "And what do you want?" Chuck asked simply. The question cut through pretense. "I thought I wanted to prove myself against you. To show I could adapt. But that's not it anymore. Now, I want to understand what you've mastered. Not just the techniques, but I don't know what to call it. The substance beneath the surface." A hint of approval flickered in Chuck's eyes. "That's a better starting point." "So what now?" Cena asked. "Do we do the rematch?" Chuck considered before responding. "What happens in that cage isn't what matters most. What matters is what you carry into it and what you take out of it. If you're looking for another moment in the spotlight, I'm not interested. If you're looking for another step in your journey, that's different." "I think I want both," Cena admitted. "I'm not sure I know how to separate them anymore." Chuck nodded, understanding rather than judging. "Then that's your first challenge. Figure out which matters more to you, the noise or the substance." Their conversation was interrupted as the promoter burst in, contracts in hand. "Gentlemen, perfect timing," The response has been astronomical. We're fast-tracking a proper event. Norris versus Cena. The ultimate legend versus icon showdown. 7 figures guaranteed, plus percentages. Chuck didn't even glance at the document. What do you say? The promoter continued, enthusiasm undimmed. Cena looked from the contract to Chuck. Something new solidifying in his expression. I'm interested, but only under the right conditions. No trash talk, no manufactured hostility. Complete respect throughout. The promoter hesitated. Well, some drama sells tickets. No, Cena interrupted firmly. That's a deal breaker, and significant portions of both purses go to veterans' charities and martial arts programs for underprivileged youth. The promoter reluctantly nodded. We can make that work. One more condition, Cena added. I don't sign until he decides if he's interested. This only happens with his full participation on his terms. All eyes turned to Chuck Norris. The promoter shifted uncomfortably under that steady gaze. Mr. Norris, this could be unprecedented. A chance to showcase your legacy to a new generation. Plus more money than... Chuck raised his hand slightly, silencing the promoter. I didn't spend my life mastering martial arts for money or fame. I did it because the pursuit of excellence is its own reward. The promoter's expression fell. But, Chuck continued, I also believe in responsibility. When you master something, you have a duty to preserve its integrity, to pass on what you've learned. He turned to Cena. You've started asking the right questions. That matters more than any contract. Does that mean you'll do it? The promoter asked hopefully. Chuck rose with unhurried precision. I'll consider it. Not for the money, not for the attention, but for the right reasons, if they exist. As he moved toward the door, he paused beside Cena. Training continues at 6 tomorrow morning, if you're interested. Bring workout clothes, not a camera crew. With that, he departed, leaving a wake of possibility. The promoter immediately launched into contingency planning. But Cena's attention remained fixed on the door through which Chuck had disappeared. Something fundamental had shifted inside him, priorities realigning, values clarifying. Whether the rematch happened seemed suddenly secondary to the journey already begun. Chuck Norris had delivered his most important lesson not through techniques or words, but through example, the quiet integrity of a life dedicated to substance over spectacle. 3 months after the Las Vegas confrontation that captured global attention, the Grand Garden Arena pulsed once more with anticipation. Every seat filled, all eyes fixed on the empty cage. The energy differed markedly from before, less frenetic showmanship, more reverent expectation. The evening's program bore little resemblance to standard fight promotions. No trash talk had preceded the event. No artificial hostility manufactured to sell tickets. Instead, the marketing focused on something deeper, the opportunity to witness a genuine exchange between masters of different eras, united by mutual respect. Backstage, Chuck Norris sat in silent meditation. His preparation resembled his public persona, disciplined, focused, without unnecessary flourish. At 76, his physique remained remarkably defined, testament to decades of uninterrupted training. His breathing followed the same measured rhythm he had maintained since his competitive days. The veteran trainer entered without knocking, their friendship transcending such formalities. "Full house out there," he said. "And different from the usual crowd. More martial artists than I've ever seen at one of these events. They're treating it like a pilgrimage." Chuck opened his eyes. "It's not about me," he said simply. "No?" The trainer raised an eyebrow. 20,000 people might disagree. "It's about what I represent," Chuck clarified. what we all represent from our era. The foundations that get forgotten sometimes. The trainer nodded. Both men had witnessed the evolution of martial arts from disciplined practice to commercial entertainment. With much gained, but something essential, often sacrificed in the transition. Cena's changed, the trainer observed. These past 3 months, working with you, it shows. Chuck acknowledged this with the barest nod. He was ready to learn. And you were ready to teach. The trainer leaned forward. Which wasn't always the case. There was a time you kept the deepest knowledge close. Times change, Chuck replied. What matters is what endures. A production assistant knocked tentatively. 10 minutes, Mr. Norris. In another dressing room, John Cena completed his own preparation. Unlike the theatrical routines that had preceded his performances throughout his career, this contained no cameras, no entourage, no carefully orchestrated displays for social media. Instead, he moved through the focused warm-up Chuck had taught him during their 3 months of daily training. Each movement precise, each breath controlled. His manager hovered nearby, clearly uncomfortable with this deviation from established patterns. The promotional team wants some last-minute content for social, the manager said, holding up his phone. Just a quick video? Cena continued his preparation without interruption. No, he replied simply. But the engagement would. No, Cena repeated. Firmer, but not unkind. We agreed. No more manufacturing moments. Whatever happens out there will be real. That's enough. The manager sighed, struggling to adapt to this new version of his client. The past 3 months had transformed Cena in ways that defied conventional career strategy. His social media presence had diminished dramatically. His public appearances had become less frequent, but more substantive. Most shocking of all, he had declined multiple high-profile opportunities to focus instead on daily training sessions with Chuck Norris, away from cameras. I still think you're leaving money on the table, the manager muttered. Cena fixed his manager with a steady gaze. 3 months ago, that would have mattered to me more than anything. Chuck helped me understand what I was missing. And what was that? Substance, Cena replied simply. I had the platform but was forgetting what it was for. Outside, the arena lights dimmed. The crowd hushed as spotlights centered on the cage. The lead announcer's voice carried through the speaker system, measured rather than hyperbolic. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we witness something unprecedented in combat sports, not just a physical contest, but a dialogue between eras. An exchange of wisdom through the universal language of martial arts. No elaborate entrance music heralded their arrival. No theatrical pyrotechnics. Just 2 men approaching from opposite sides, each carrying the weight of their respective legacies with different but equally dignified bearing. Chuck moved with measured confidence, each step purposeful. Focus unwavering. The crowd rose in a wave of respectful appreciation, many bowing slightly as he passed. Across the arena, Cena approached with transformed demeanor. Gone was the exaggerated swagger and playing to cameras. In its place was something more substantial, the centered calm of a man who had begun to understand that true strength required no advertisement. They reached the cage simultaneously, ascending opposite steps with timing that seemed choreographed, but was simply the natural rhythm of disciplined practitioners. The crowd's response swelled, not frenzied excitement, but deeper appreciation of witnessing something authentic. Center cage. They met with mutual acknowledgement. No trash talk. No theatrical intimidation. Simply respectful recognition between practitioners of the same craft. Thank you, Cena said quietly, his voice carrying only to Chuck's ears. For everything these past months. Chuck nodded once. Show what you've learned, he replied simply. The referee approached, reviewed the agreed-upon rules, essentially an exhibition with light to medium contact, focused on technical exchange rather than domination, then stepped back to allow final preparations. The arena fell silent as both men settled into their respective stances. The contrast remained stark. Cena's more contemporary posture against Chuck's classic martial arts base, but something had aligned between them. A shared understanding that transcended style or era. The bell rang with crystalline clarity. What unfolded over the next 15 minutes transcended ordinary combat sports. This was no brutal contest for dominance, no desperate struggle for victory. Instead, 20,000 spectators witnessed something closer to physical philosophy, a dialogue conducted through movement, each technique a statement, each counter a response. Cena displayed the fruits of his apprenticeship with impressive humility. His natural athleticism now harnessed by newfound technical precision. His power tempered by increased economy of motion. He moved with purpose rather than spectacle, each action containing clear intention rather than theatrical flourish. Chuck's performance defied his age entirely. He flowed like water around Cena's attacks, redirecting rather than resisting, conserving energy while demonstrating principles that had defined his fighting philosophy for decades. When he countered, his techniques carried the weight of thousands of hours of practice, clean, precise, devastatingly effective, even when executed with controlled power. From the commentator's booth came hushed appreciation. "What we're seeing isn't just fighting," the technical analyst observed. "It's the physical embodiment of martial arts principles that span generations." Cena, representing the contemporary evolution, Norris anchoring it in traditional foundations. Inside the cage, the exchange continued with increasing depth and complexity, each sequence building on the last, creating a narrative that resembled chess more than combat. The crowd watched in reverent silence, recognizing they were witnessing something that transcended ordinary competition. As the final bell sounded, Cena and Chuck lowered their guards simultaneously. No theatrical celebration, no manufactured drama, simply mutual acknowledgement between practitioners who had communicated something meaningful through their shared discipline. They met center cage, clasping hands with genuine respect. The referee raised both their arms, the predetermined outcome for an exhibition focused on demonstration rather than competition. The crowd rose as one, applause building into thunderous appreciation. Backstage, away from cameras, they shared a moment of quiet reflection. "You've come far," Chuck said, the assessment carrying weight precisely because he never offered unearned praise. "I had a good teacher," Cena replied, "though I've barely scratched the surface. That understanding itself is progress." Chuck adjusted his jacket with characteristic precision. Most never reach that point. Their conversation paused as the promoter approached, tracking real-time metrics on tablets. "Gentlemen, absolutely phenomenal," he enthused. "The numbers are astronomical. We're thinking series regular exhibitions, maybe a mentorship reality show. Chuck teaching John and other celebrities the deeper aspects of martial arts." The promoter's enthusiasm crashed against Chuck's impassive expression. Cena stepped forward before Chuck needed to respond. "Thank you. But no," he said firmly, but respectfully. "What we shared tonight wasn't about numbers. It was about something that can't be packaged into content." The promoter blinked in confusion. "But the commercial potential—" "Not everything valuable can be commercialized," Cena interrupted gently. "Some things are worth protecting from that process." He glanced at Chuck, receiving a slight nod of approval. As the promoter retreated, Chuck and Cena continued toward their dressing rooms. "That was well handled," Chuck observed quietly. "I had a good example," Cena replied. They paused where their paths would separate. 3 months earlier, They had been strangers, representing different approaches. Now they shared an understanding that transcended their differences. A recognition that beneath styles and commercial considerations lay principles that remained constant. "What you did for me," Cena said, searching for adequate words. "Sharing your knowledge, your time. I can never repay that." "You don't repay it," Chuck replied. "You pass it on." That's how traditions survive. With that fundamental truth hanging between them, they parted ways not as legend and fan, not as master and student, but as practitioners of the same enduring discipline, separated by era but united by respect for the craft they shared. In the arena, the crowd dispersed slowly. Conversations focused not on who had won, but on what they had witnessed. Martial arts in its purest form, technique elevated to philosophy through disciplined practice and mutual respect. Outside in the Las Vegas night, under stars dimmed by the city's neon, Chuck and Cena exchanged a final handshake before their paths diverged. "The hardest part comes next," Chuck said, his gaze steady. "What's that?" Cena asked. "Maintaining what you've learned when everything around you encourages the opposite." Chuck adjusted his jacket with characteristic precision. "The world rewards noise. Substance has to be its own reward." Cena nodded, absorbing the wisdom. "I understand better now. Not completely, but better." "That's all any of us can do," Chuck replied. "Keep understanding better. Keep working toward mastery, knowing we'll never fully achieve it." As they separated, Cena carried not just new techniques but a new understanding that legends aren't made by claiming greatness, but by pursuing excellence, regardless of whether anyone notices. That respect isn't demanded through words, but earned through consistent action. That substance without noise will always outlast noise without substance. In the end, it wasn't about who won in the cage. It was about what survived beyond it. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch, and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.